We have Dr. David Driscoll, who, as commissioner of the Massachusetts Department of Education, oversaw that state's education reform efforts. And what he brings to today's discussion is an ability to understand that everything that we try to do in terms of making education better for our kids is really rooted in what works for the child. It's not about ideology, it's not about party labels, it's about making education better. And we're going to hear from Dr. Driscoll about his experiences, and we're going to hear how education was made better in Massachusetts, and we're going to learn how we can take some of those lessons and use them here in New Jersey.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I appreciate those kind words, and I'm very pleased to be here, and nice to meet all of you. And I want to, first of all, congratulate and thank the chairman for this endeavor. I think that one of the things that's missing, particularly in the education debate, is a civil discussion. We're just too divisive, as I think you said, bitter and divisive, and that's it's very troubling to me. And also the issue of education, for those of us in education, it's a frustration that education doesn't, as a topic, does not get prominence in, for example, the presidential campaign, and certainly the economy is important, national security, all those kinds of things. But, after all, we're talking about the future of this country when we talk about education, and somehow it gets pushed way down, and it's a soundbite kind of world. So I wish every state would begin these kinds of discussions, because I think that's what we need. A couple of points of context. First of all, you may all remember Robert Reich, who was the Secretary of Labor under President Clinton. He used to live in Massachusetts, now he's living in California. And he's all of about 5 feet tall, if you've ever seen him. And he ran for governor in Massachusetts, and he used to go around, the first thing he would say as he got up was, "I'll be short." So I'll be brief, and I really just want to do a couple of things. A couple of things of context. One, student achievement in America isn't where it ought to be. And even more so for those kids, poor kids in America, black, Latino kids, etc. So we have to accept that. That's a huge problem. And it's a problem we must address. And in fact, there are other countries that aren't democracies that do a better job at equalizing education than we do. We separate them very quickly. I always say, if you want the best physics teacher in Massachusetts, you go to Wayland, you don't go to Holyoke. So we have too many ways of separating out kids and so forth. So I think that's the first issue, is that we have to address this student achievement problem. It's getting worse. Countries are going by us. Student achievement around the world, there are countries that are just outperforming us that just shouldn't be. So we need to understand that. So that's number one. But the number two context is we're all in this together. And it's not going to be solved just by the schools. Now, you mentioned the school breakfast issue. Think about the summer loss issue. What people don't think about with that loss of achievement over the summer, particularly for a lot of poor kids that aren't involved in engaging activities, that goes for 12 years. It's cumulative. So, yes, we have a problem, but we're only going to solve it if we work together. And if we continue this, what is obvious across the country, this very divisive, it's happening in Congress over every issue, but it's also happening in education, which is a shame. And the chairman's quite right. I work for Republican governors and a heavily Democratic legislature. I work with, Mitt Romney and Ted Kennedy on the same issues. Mitt Romney doesn't seem to brag about the health care issue in Massachusetts that he was part of, but that's part of the deal, I guess. And so I'm actually not here to tell you what to do by any means. I simply want to talk about what happened in Massachusetts, and if some of those lessons are helpful, fine. So let me just say what happened in Massachusetts. As the chairman mentioned, we passed a Education Reform Act in 1993 with great bipartisan support. And so it not only had the support of the Republican governor and the Democratic legislature at the time, but it had the support of the business community, parents, the unions, etc. Now, people had selective memory when we went to put the graduation requirement in that was required by the law, the unions opposed it. I said to them, geez, you supported the law. And they said, well, we didn't think we'd ever really get to that, giving the kids a test to get a diploma. But nonetheless, when we passed the law, people were together. There was a strong foundation formula that I talked to David about, where a majority of the state funds went to the poorer districts and so forth, as you've faced that issue of equity here. What happened, fast forward to 2003, when Massachusetts was the first state to ever get the highest scale score on 4th grade reading, 4th grade math, 8th grade reading, and 8th grade math. Never happened before in this country on NAEP testing. We did it in 2003, we did it in 2005, 07, 09, and I'm announcing next Tuesday we did it in 2011 as well, not 2011, 2011. So obviously we've had a lot of success. On the other hand, we still have the great gap, and as you pointed out, Mr. Chairman, there are places that New Jersey is equal to and better than we are in some instances. So there's a lot to build on in the state. Essentially, we decided that we had to raise standards and expectations. So we raised standards and expectations for kids, and in that case, we set very high framework standards. You know, our standards are among the highest in the country. When compared to NAEP, we are set the highest standards. We then established an assessment to go along with that standard, and kids had to pass a test in grade 10 in order to graduate from high school. And there was the usual falderall, although it's an 8th grade standard, frankly, at the 10th grade level to pass, and we've proved that now. 92%, 95% of our kids pass. And student achievement rose as a result. And even though that tends to be a divisive issue when you give believe me, I was burned in effigy, by the way, but you know, it doesn't hurt. You know, despite the divisiveness or the, you know, that issue, we found ways. We, for example, established an appeals process, because a kid can have a bad day, or a kid could be poor at taking tests. So if they can show, there are ways that you can show, well, all we care about is the performance. So there are ways to show your regular high school grades, et cetera, that you're doing the equivalent of that work. We had focused retests. You know, why ask the calculus questions for kids who are down at that level and so forth? So there were ways, and we involved the minority community, teachers, and so forth in that. So I think that's what you're doing today is the kind of thing that can really make a tremendous difference in seeing to it that policies and practice have a reasonableness and have a way of really working. Higher standards and expectations for educators. And in that regard, we actually instituted a teacher test. We did not have a teacher test before, and we instituted a teacher test. Now, I wouldn't have implemented it the way we did. We implemented it with a sledgehammer, so maybe that's a good example of Massachusetts you don't want to follow. We had a quiet, shy chairman of the board for a short time named John Silber. If you've ever heard of him, he's president of Boston University. He was the governor's opponent. He was Bill Weld's opponent. Would have been governor had he gone off to Bermuda the last 2 weeks of the election and not stood before the cameras and alienated everybody in the state, which was, you got to know John Silber. So he implemented the teacher testing, and he was, you know, he did it really with a sledgehammer. Now, I have to be happy about it because it's the reason I became commissioner, because the current commissioner that followed him got thrown out of office. But in fact, when he ran for governor, President Senator Bulger, he has a brother named Whitey you may have heard of, our Senate president said he supported John Silber for governor, and he was sorry that John Silber didn't win, because the first thing John Silber would have done had he got elected is invade Rhode Island. So we instituted it with a sledgehammer, which was the wrong way to do it. But then I became commissioner, and reason prevailed, and we found ways to work with the prospective teachers, higher education institutions, and so forth. The bottom line is content knowledge of teachers rose significantly, and I think that had a lot to do with the success of our students. And then finally, we raised standards and expectations for schools and school districts. And here it's ironic that we looked around the country and said, you know, who has a good system? And we picked, of all places, Texas. We picked Texas because they disaggregated the data, which meant in Massachusetts, like all states, but more so in Massachusetts, you can get away with, gee, our scores are good. But then if you look at the subgroups, the black and Hispanic, special ed kids and so forth, the ELL kids, it doesn't look so good. So we like that aspect of what they did, and this adequate yearly progress, which gave you an opportunity, because it's about growth. We're not going to solve these problems, it's about improvement. We set it out to 2020. I call it a nice hypotenuse in the sky that was reasonable. Why, and I had this discussion with Senator Kennedy on a number of occasions, why Congress picked 2014, I'll never know. But No Child Left Behind could have worked better had they got a reasonable way of people. Then you had a chance of making adequate yearly progress. Now it's 85% of the schools in Massachusetts haven't made adequate. That includes some terrific schools. So anyway, it worked for us until No Child Left Behind came along. So that's essentially what we did in Massachusetts. We had a good plan, we had a good law, but more importantly, we brought people together, and I think that's what needs to happen. So, Mr. Chairman, I applaud you for doing this. I hope it continues. I hope it continues across this state. This is what we need to do. It's so important. It gets pushed in the background. Education has to be front and center, and we have to figure out ways to work together. Schools aren't going to solve this thing alone. You know, and saying, well, this one provision or this one thing is going to do it like it's a magic, not going to happen. And you're certainly not going to reform schools without the support of the teachers and principals and everyone else. So anyway, that was our experience in Massachusetts, and I look forward to the discussion and hearing what's on your mind in New Jersey, Mr. Chairman.
We heard from Dr. Driscoll, and we heard from so many people. Now we want to hear from you. This was a 2-hour discussion today, but the discussion does not end today. It really is going to involve you. You have the opportunity to participate in this discussion by emailing or calling the state party, and we would appreciate hearing your input on how we can make New Jersey and New Jersey's education better.